Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Nayanika, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing with you all the books that I read in March. So March was an amazing reading month because I ended up reading 24 books, and I don't think I have ever read as many books in a month as I did this March. It was surprising, it was shocking to me when I finally got to see the number. And I think the reason why I could get to so many books was because of the self-isolation, because of the lockdown. Of course, I could not go to college, and so I was at home the whole day. There was nothing I could do except read and watch a bit of Netflix and have mommy in the kitchen. So yeah, that's the reason why I could read as many books. And I feel really happy that my March wrap-up page in my journal is like totally completely full, and it just gives me a very good feeling. So this is the whole update, and I've got all the details here, and I'll be sharing with you all the reviews. So before we go into all of the reviews of the different books that I picked up in March, I want to share with you all my book club pick for the month of April. And this month I decided to pick up The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. Now this is sort of a slave narrative, but it is a modern day depiction. It won the Pulitzer in 2017. Yeah, 2017, and it is also the winner of the National Book Award. Now in the story, we follow this slave called Cora. She is a slave in a cotton plantation in Georgia. Now all of you must already know all of the situation back then, before the American Civil War took place. So we all know what the Underground Railroad is. It's like a series of safe houses that lead from the south of America, of North America, from the south up to Canada, which helps all the you could say all the slaves, all the black people who have been oppressed, to escape from bondage, from slavery. So in this book, the Underground Railroad is an actual railroad. It's let me dictate all the words. Yeah, in this razor-sharp novel, the Underground Railroad has assumed a physical form, a dilapidated boxcar pulled by a steam locomotive, picking up fugitives wherever it can. So now basically Cora runs away from this, and she is always chased by this slave hunter. Yes, there were people called slave hunters who like chase all the runaway slaves. So there is a slave hunter who is really desperate to catch her and her mother, because once, like supposedly a really long time ago, they had escaped him. So he's got that vengeance in him, so he wants to catch them. Now this is going to be a very harrowing read, I think, because of the entire context matter, but at the same time I think this is also a book that we all need to know and understand about the history of the world, how it was back then, and basically to help us understand not to indulge in any such practices, if not slavery, then at least such racist behavior and all of that. We need to read this book to basically absorb all of the atrocities that has already occurred, that have already taken place, and we need to ensure that we do not do all of that again. So that was quite heavy, whatever I just said, but I am very, very excited to read this book. Alright, so I will be talking more about this book. Since I'll be reading it in April, I'll be talking more about this book in my April video. And if you have any thoughts, any feelings, you can send me an email. I'll share my email ID down below, so you can definitely share with me your views on what you felt about this book. I think the sequel or the follow-up, most probably, I'm not sure if it's a sequel or a follow-up. It's called The Nickel Boys. It came out recently, so if you really like this book, you can definitely get to that book as well very soon. I have also checked if this book is available on Scribd or not, and it is available both as an ebook and also as an audiobook. So since Scribd is giving you free 30-day trial for now without even entering your card details, you can definitely use Scribd. I definitely will be using Scribd. I'll be listening to the audiobook as well as reading this book both simultaneously. So I'll see how it goes, and don't forget to share your views with me as well about this book, and I'll gladly speak about them in my next video, which will be my April video. So without further ado, let's get into all of the books that I read in March. Like I said, I read 24 books in March, and all of these were a great mixture of different varieties. I read classics, I read literary fiction, I read fantasy, I read romance, then I read poetry, I read a thriller, I read another fantasy, and I read a couple of non-fiction, well, not exactly non-fiction, but like bullet journaling stuff. So I read a variety of books this month, and I'm very, very excited to share with you all my views on them. And let's get down to them. So the first book that I picked up in March was Beloved, and this is by Toni Morrison. Now this was also my pick of the month for March, and I was really glad because I also needed to read this for one of my classes, so it was really great. And it was really great to see all of your comments and all of that, your views on this book. Now this book is basically about this former slave called Sithe, and it's again occurring in the southern belt, you could say, southern part of America, where slavery was practiced in all of the plantations. Now this is the story of Sithe, how she escapes from slavery, and she is free now, but in another way she is not free because she is still haunted by the ghost of her daughter whom she killed. Now that is the whole story basically, and it's very, very great. Now however, because of the subject matter, it does get a bit intense at some parts, so like in the middle it got a bit too much for me, and I needed to take a break from it and like pick up another book. It just was so harrowing and sad that I couldn't read it at one go. I really couldn't. It was very, very hard and very harsh, very difficult for me because of the subject matter, like I just said. Now that being said, this book, I'm going to compare this to The Bluest Eye, which is another one of Toni Morrison's book, which I read last year. I loved that book. It was pretty quick, pretty easy to understand compared to this. Now in this book, in Beloved, there are a lot of sequences where the characters are thinking, they're going back onto all of the things that they face. Memory is an important concept here, so there is constantly revival of the memories. People are thinking about the past and how they should have done this thing, they shouldn't have done that, and basically pondering over life. So it does get a bit I think it drags a bit in some bits, especially in the middle, and I was very, very uncomfortable with that, especially because of the mixture of the subject matter and this dragging bit. It took a kind of a toll on me, but then of course I'd get back to it, and I read it, I rated it 4 stars, and it was overall really good. I really enjoyed it. I cannot say I didn't, because there were some really, really beautiful lines, and I annotated all of it, and as you can see, there are so many dog-marked pages that I did, and then that was a tissue paper actually, where I wrote certain notes of like thoughts I felt while I was reading the book. And all of that I have annotated quite a bit in this book. It was really, really helpful, and many of you have asked me like, is this book any different from the actual text, since this is the reading guide edition? No, it's actually the exact same, except it has some extra questions in the end, so that it can possibly help you discuss this in your book club as well. And then especially for students, this one is a great edition. This is the vintage edition, by the way. I really, really enjoyed it. It was sad and everything, but there are some really important concepts here, how guilt and then memory and the supernatural have been intertwined, and how important the concept of community is in this book. It's very, very characteristic, and I really did enjoy it. The character growth, the character development throughout the book, especially because the characters tended to, go back to in time, like in the middle. So every time there is a shift in their characters and their beings, and it's really interesting to see the subtle changes in how they have changed over the years. Their perception of things. And another thing which I found really heartbreaking was how deeply the whole institution of slavery affected these people on a psychological level. It left scars, and this hurt, this loss in a way of their identity is also inherited by their children, which is really sad, because Sithe was a slave, yes, but her children also in one way or another have been psychologically affected by it, by her experiences as a slave, and her actions, they are actually determined by her fear to not let her children be treated as she was when she was a slave. So it's very understanding. There are quite a few nuances of human psychology, human behavior, and all of that, and I really like this book. Of course, however, this is not my favorite Toni Morrison book. I have read 2, of course, so far only, but I definitely enjoyed The Bluest Eye more than I did enjoy Beloved. But it was definitely a good book. I would definitely recommend you all to pick it up, and I think this was a great book to read as my book of the month for March. So yeah, 4 stars to this book. The next book that I'm going to talk to you all about is Reef by Romesh Gunesekera. Now, why I picked up this book was because I read Suncatcher by the same author, Romesh Gunesekera, back in 2019, and I really loved it. That one was literary fiction as well, so is this one, and I fell in love with that book. I think I rated it somewhere between 4.5 to 5. I think I might have rated it 5, and I really enjoyed it. It was just an amazing book. So I knew that I have to read more of the author's works because his writing is just out of this world. And yeah, when I came across this book in a second-hand shop, I didn't hesitate. I picked it up, and I have to say that I was surprised, yet not surprised, that it was his work. Now, Reef is a story of Triton. He is this boy who goes to work as a houseboy in the house of Mrs. Salgado, who is a marine biologist, and it is very beautiful. Now, firstly, the writing style, it's very lyrical, very poetic, and it just, the way he writes, he easily invokes in your mind all the images that he wants to convey. The imagery is very strong, and I think it has been made more powerful because of his specific style of writing. Now, it also makes you feel very nostalgic of the time gone by, of the years past. Now, I personally have not lived through the political scenario that this book is set in, of course, but the way the author writes about this events is really great. It's like you live there, you experience those events, and now you are reliving them again through this book. So it's that powerful, and I really loved it. It was also very funny in certain parts, very subtle but very funny, and then again it is also very multi-layered. The subtlety is one of the tools that Gunesekera writes with, I think. I really loved it. And it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize. Now that is something that I didn't know, despite the fact that it's written right here at the top, but it was very great. I rated it 4.5, like I said, and one of the things that I really liked about it is that in the beginning, Triton is this young boy, and we don't know much about him. What I mean to say by that is that even he doesn't know much about himself. He's very young. He hasn't totally become self-aware. So we are still discovering him as the story goes on. We are discovering his likes, his dislikes, the way he thinks, and all of that. And at the same time, through his relation with his master, with his I don't know what you can call him. So the person that he works for, Mrs. Salgado, who is this marine biologist, we see how Mr. Salgado has also evolved as a person throughout the book, because he changes, and although the change is a bit subtle, it's not very obvious. I think the change in Mr. Salgado's character, it's just as beautiful, and the way the author carries it forward is just amazing. The interrelationships between all the different characters is also very nuanced, very multi-layered, and I loved how the conversations were carried out, the dialogues. And again, in case of Triton, he is also competing against another servant that Mr. Salgado has, who is Joseph, I think his name was, and the competition that both of these two have for each other, it's again very, very interesting. And as is classic Gunesekera, he writes about the political scenario, yes, but it is very, very subtle. It's not very obvious, so you have to be able to catch all of those, but at the same time I think you will definitely be able to catch all the nuances of the political innuendos that he puts in, because a lot of the environment is discussed in the parties that they held, that the characters, Mrs. Salgado with his friends. And I almost forgot to tell you about the food in this book, because Triton is an amazing cook. He cooks all of these different things, and the way he describes them, wow. To mix a luff cake with 10 eggs, creamed butter and fresh cashew nuts, and to steam the exotic parrotfish for his master's lover. So overall, this was an amazing book, and I really love Romesh Gunesekera's writing. He certainly has become one of the authors I go to, and I really am looking forward to picking up some other works of his after this one. Now, you may obviously know that I will be unable to talk about each of the 24 books that I read in March, so I'll be just going over a few. I will be going over 6 books. So let me tell you about the next book that I read in March. I picked up A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. Now, this is a book that I read for a paper that I was writing, and I really enjoyed it. It really made me think a lot. So as you all know, A Room of One's Own originated from a series of essays that Virginia Woolf gave in certain colleges, and it basically speaks about women and their need to have a private space in order to develop as a person, to grow their individuality and all of that. But at the same time, she also speaks about how difficult it is for women to be great writers. She starts with that that there aren't as many great writers as there are men, and why? People ask why, but it's because women are not financially independent. Firstly, they're not allowed to work. They were not allowed to work. Of course, times have changed now, so they were not allowed to work. And secondly, they did not have a place of one's own, and it is very difficult when you don't have a place of your own to to work, to let your mental juices flow and all of that. Now, I have to say that her example, she gave an example of Shakespeare's sister. She said that, Shakespeare was a man, so he was allowed to go to college, university and all of that. He was allowed to get his education, and that's why he was able to produce so many great works. He was allowed to go socialize in society, meet other people, other writers, other playwrights, and basically have intellectual talks with them. So he was able to create such great works of art as he did. However, let us say that Shakespeare had a sister, but it was not the custom of the day to let the woman work, so she was not allowed to work, and instead she was asked to work in the kitchen, not given enough education as Shakespeare. And basically, even if she had that genius, it was not discovered just because she was not given the opportunity to work as a man did, to have her own space as probably William did. He had his own desk and space and all of that. So it's very interesting to see how she draws all of these draws up all of these different instances, and again draws conclusion from all of these. Now, another example she gives is that she goes to this sort of lunch or dinner, I think, I'm not sure exactly, but then she goes to this lunch, I think, in the men's college, and they were given amazing fabulous food. There was a variety, heavy, rich foods, wine and all of that. But then she had dinner at the women's college, and she was like, women are not given enough to eat. Why is that? I mean, they were just given water. The food was very simple, very meager, and she comments on that. It's that women's colleges are not given much importance. It was only at that time when she was writing the book, and that women's colleges were coming up. So it's really interesting when you read works, feminist works like this. It is very interesting to see how the concept of asserting one's rights, asserting one's individuality has changed throughout the ages, because in those times the things that women had to fight for were different, if not completely different, at least a bit different than they are today. For instance, in those days, women were not allowed to work. They were married off when they were like not even 20. But today it's not like that. But still, essentially, the fights that we women have had to fight, they have remained. We still have to fight for so many things today, even today. No wonder the word sexist is still there. So until the day when the word sexist won't be there, I think feminist works will keep on coming up. So anyway, yeah, this was a great book. I rated it, let me check, A Room of One's Own, I rated it 4 stars. Again, since I read it for a paper, this is also very, very heavily annotated, as you can see. So yeah, if you are looking for delving into feminist works, this is a great place to start. The English is comparatively easy than older works, so I would definitely recommend you all to check this out. Now, the next book that I am going to talk to you all about, the 4th book actually, is another feminist text, and it is The Awakening by Chopin. Now, this is another book that I read for one of my classes, gender studies to be specific. And firstly, I need to tell you all that this is another feminist text, but this was first published in 1899. So at that time, this was very, very modern for its time. So it wasn't well accepted back then, but then later on, when feminism was like really growing, this was recognized as an early feminist work. Now, basically, in the in The Awakening, we follow this character called Edna Pontellier. She, her husband, and their 2 kids, and the nurse, like the nanny, they are holidaying at this resort in the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah, and then in this summer, it is the time when Edna has her awakening as in she awakens to her individual self, because all of these times she had just been a wife, a mother, a daughter, and society was such that it had internalized all of these in her, so she was like kind of okay with it, and she was not questioning her identity at all. But then in this summer vacation, it all changes. Now, she has an affair. I really cannot say affair, but I think it would be better if I read out this particular line from the book, because unless you have read the book, you know it's not exactly an affair, but then I don't know how better to describe it. When an illicit summer romance awakens new ideas and longings in Edna, she can barely understand herself and cannot hope for aid or acceptance in the stifling attitudes of Louisiana society. So this is another exciting book because it's set in since it was published in 1899, it's basically set in the last decade of the 19th century. So it's very exciting, not exciting, but like eye-opening to see all of the expectations that were had, that women had to live with, and men were so much more carefree. Like Edna's husband, she goes out to the club to meet all the other men, and she has to stay back, she has to look after the children, and she has to be the sort of woman who like fawns upon the husband or her father, make them feel special. That was what was expected of her, and we see other female characters in the book do that. They fawn over the males in their lives and make them feel special, you know. That was what they were supposed to do. And Edna is again not a mother figure, not a mother woman. She is not particularly occupied with kids or the thought of having kids and all of that. And then again, we have another woman, Madame Ratignolle, as her foil. Now, Madame Ratignolle is what you would call the essential mother woman. She takes care of her husband, she takes care of the kids, she coddles them and all of that. And they have been married for 7 years, and she has kids every 2 years. It's like she was a stereotypical woman of that time. And then again, we have another woman, Mademoiselle Reef. Now, she is again like completely opposite to Madame Ratignolle, because she is an artist, she is a pianist actually, and she has given up all the societal conventions, and she lives according to her own will and her own whims basically. And Edna is stuck between these two positions of women. She cannot be the mother because that's just not who she is, and then she cannot also be the artist because she cannot completely give up her place in society, because this awakening that she gets, her touch with her individuality, her own self, it's also the cost of her husband, because her husband is paying for the vacation and all of that. She is not yet financially independent, and it's very, very interesting to see all of the nuances of her awakening, and whether you would call Edna a victim or a hero. It's very, very interesting, so I would definitely recommend you all to pick this up. This is also another book which I rated 4 stars. I really enjoyed. Again, as you can see, heavily annotated, just because it was also a class read, so I really did enjoy it. I read another one of Kate Chopin's short stories. I think it was The Story of an Hour. Then I also read Silk Stockings, and there was another one, I forgot the name of that short story, but she writes all of these feminist works, and it's very interesting, specifically because the concept of feminism has changed over time. So yeah, definitely recommend this one. Now moving on, we're almost at the end. I'm left with 2 books to talk to you all about, and the first one I'll be talking to you all about is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. Now this is a book which I really, really enjoyed reading. I rated it 4 stars. I rated it 4 stars. Now the reason why I picked up this book is simply because I watched the series last year, and I loved it so much that I knew I just had to get my hands on this book and read it. And now that I've read it, the only regret that I have is that I did not buy the sequel when I bought it. I should have, because now I'm like really eager for more, and I cannot buy the ebook. I rather want the actual hard physical copy. So A Discovery of Witches is basically about this witch, Diana Bishop. She is a witch, and then there's this vampire, Matthew Claremont, and oh my god, the romance is wow. Okay. But it's amazing, and all of the problem starts when Diana, she's a witch, she discovers this manuscript which has been lost to time for like ages, for like hundreds of years, for like almost 500 years now, I think. And the problem starts when she discovers this manuscript, and everybody comes looking for it because they all want it. And this manuscript supposedly contains the story of the origins of all these creatures, because vampires and witches, we also have demons. It's very, very interesting. Now the beginning of this book is set in the university in Oxford, I think, and me being the dark academician that I am, I really, really love that vibe. I love the whole theme, the aesthetic. They're studying, they're working hard, and all of it. I found that very, very inspiring, and all of that. I also love the family dynamic, the politics, the world system. Since this is like sort of fantasy but set in the modern world, the whole fantasy structure system along with the modern world, so how it all works, it was also very interesting. Again, the power hierarchy and all of that, it was just amazing. There were just a few action sequences which I think the author wrote really, really well, and I really liked them. And I am very excited to see how it goes. It has a lot of intellectual stuff as well, and I saw somewhere that it was described as a more intellectual and adult version of Twilight. Now I'm not exactly sure of that, but if the parallel can be drawn, then I would agree with the intellectual part. So I do think that this is very intellectual, because there are also mention of several other important manuscripts, important journals which are actual and real, and you will definitely have read about them. So it's very, very interesting, and this coming together of the old world and the new in, like Diana, she's a modern woman, but Matthew Claremont, he's like an old vampire. So this coming together of the different worlds is also inspiring. It's also exciting to read about, and I love the romance, I lost the word, but the dynamic of the duo, the power dynamics overall, it was just great. And I can only, I think I can only just fangirl over it, but it was really, really great, and I really enjoyed it. I would definitely recommend you to pick it up as well if you are looking for such romance reads which are a bit more heavy and not just very frivolous. The Light, it has quite a bit of intellectual element in it, so I really enjoyed it, and I would definitely recommend you all to read this book as well. Did I say how many stars I rated it? I rated it 4 stars. So really enjoyed this book, and I recommend you all to pick it up as well. So we have reached the final book. This is by no means the last book I read in March. This was rather the 7th book that I read in March, and I really loved it. I finished it in like 5 days, which is quite good for me because at that time I still had my classes going on. I think, yeah, I still did. Holidays were still not declared yet, the lockdown, so I was busy with classes, and yet I finished it in 5 days. And I think you must have guessed what it is, but Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. Now firstly, I have to say a big, huge humongous thank you to Bloomsbury for sending this to me, because I am really, really grateful. I am trash for Sarah J. Maas, and I really loved this book as well. I think this is an adult fantasy which was really unique, because I think this was the first adult fantasy which is set in the really modern world, urban setting. So we actually have phones, skyscrapers, helicopters, all of that, guns and everything. And we also have the swaggering fae prince, we have party princesses, we have got angels and demons and all of that, and it's amazing. Now one of the things which I really love about Sarah J. Maas's books is that all of them, the characters that she portrays, the boys and the girls, males and the females, all of them really are going through certain issues of their own. They're dealing with demons of their own, and nobody has it easy, you know. All of these characters, they are going through something or the other, and the way they go through them with the help of their friends and sometimes by themselves and emerge victorious at the end, it always really inspires me. And like I have said in my previous videos as well, when I read Sarah J. Maas, no matter what other feeling I get, I always get the sense of hope from her books, because all of the characters are like that. They give you hope. It's like, this is not the end, this too shall pass. So the character dynamics was amazing, and the power dynamics, especially between the different groups of creatures, was just as interesting. Now there were moments when I was like cackling like a mad woman when I was reading this book, but there was one particular time when I was howling and crying, and my sister, who is also a reader and who reads such not romance but like fantasy novels, so she knows how it feels when like certain things happen. So when I was like howling and crying, she just patted me and she was like, don't worry, it happens, you know, it happens, don't cry. Did somebody die? I'm like, no, nobody died, and I'm not giving you a spoiler but yeah, it was funny. I went through a roller coaster of emotions when I read this book, and I really, really loved it. And however, one of the things that I have to tell you about is that I did feel that there were certain similarities between the characters in this book and the characters in the rest of Sarah J. Maas's books. For instance, we have the protagonist, we have called Bryce. Now, of course, the way she is, I found that she was a bit like Selena Sardothian, if you know who I am referring to, from the Throne of Glass series. And then Connor feels a lot like Sam Courtland, if you know what I mean. So yeah. And overall, it was really good. I really loved the emotions that Sarah J. Maas played with. She plays with all our emotions, but yeah, not complaining. I really love this book, and I am only sad that I won't be getting the sequel very, very soon, because I am eager for that, despite the fact that this is a monster, and I'm betting that the sequel will be a monster as well. And then there were some amazing characters. We've got Syrinx, we've got Libaba. It's not how you pronounce the name, but it's just amazing. And all the different creatures that Sarah J. Maas has come up with, the idea of it really is amazing, mind-blowing. And yeah, I really love this book. And if you haven't read this book yet, by the way, this is adult fantasy, so you definitely need to read this book as well. So I read this book, really loved it, and I think now I am finally ready to read Ninth House, because I could not read Ninth House. Yeah, I had to like keep it down halfway because I was just not invested enough in it. I mean, I thought the story was good, but at that moment I could not concentrate on it because it just felt too heavy, I think. But now I think after reading this, that one will be a piece of cake perhaps. So I'll see how that goes. But yeah, definitely recommend you all to read this book very, very soon. And we have reached the end of this video, and I hope you really enjoyed it. I hope you all had an amazing reading month in March, and I hope you will have an amazing reading month in April as well. Now, like I said, I have shared with you all my book for April already, and it is The Underground Railroad. I hope you will all be picking this up, and we will be discussing it next month in my next video. Whatever your thoughts are about this book, whether you love it, hate it, have mixed feelings about it, hate a character, would like to kill a character, don't forget to leave your comments down in the comments box down below, or you can definitely send me an email, because I've just added my email ID as well down in the description box. So don't forget to reach out to me with your thoughts and anything. So that's that for this video, and I hope you enjoyed it, and you like, comment and subscribe on my channel, and I hope to see you soon. And don't forget to click on the bell icon down below. Peace out.